Hi guys, today I'm going to be reviewing the news from the UFC over the last week. First I'm going to talk about a potential Tate versus Holm 2. Their first fight, Tate won with a submission in the last round. I think she's losing the fight. Holm has recently said the loss still bothers her. Holm was obviously the champion at that point, and Tate then won the belt with that submission. I think that'd be an interesting fight, potentially a fight for UFC 300. That's got two veterans in. I think that'd be a good fight to potentially have as the headline of the prelims, or potentially an early fight on the main card. I wouldn't like to see it any higher. Potentially a fight for UFC 300. Tate's coming off a win from last week. I guess that'd be an interesting fight to potentially see in the future. Then Dan Hooker has made some comments about Islam Makhachev, saying that he would probably retire before giving Tsarukyan a fight, because of how risky it is. I wouldn't say he would probably retire because he's fought Tsarukyan before. Although Tsarukyan gave him his toughest fight other than Volkanovski, I can't see Makhachev trying to avoid the fight. The UFC would definitely make him have that fight. I don't think they'd let him move up without having that fight. Hopefully that fight will happen some point next year. I think Makhachev, we need to see what happens here, really. Makhachev obviously fought Volkanovski in a rematch in October. I wouldn't be surprised if Tsarukyan does get the rematch next year at some point. I think Makhachev isn't likely to avoid anyone. I think he has the confidence that he is the best in the world. So I think, why would he avoid anyone if he truly believes he's the best in the world? And especially as he's already beaten Tsarukyan. Then we've got Tim Elliott is coming in to fight Sumudaji in the flyweight division this weekend. Tim Elliott, has come in at short notice. I think it happened yesterday or overnight in the UK. Interesting fight. I think that's a better fight than who was Sumudaji previously supposed to fight, than the Alan Nascimento fight. Obviously they're both ranked. Been an interesting fight to see what happens, I guess. I'll be previewing that on Friday. So I'll give you my thoughts on the fight then. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has said he's going to beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he's actually said he's going to stop Shavkat Rakhmonov and then make a push for Leon Edwards. I think if he does beat Shavkat Rakhmonov, I'd say definitely if he knocks out Shavkat Rakhmonov, which I don't think will happen. We're going to have a preview of that. I think that's actually, is that next weekend? That big card, I think that's next weekend, UFC 296. So I'll be previewing all of that next week. I'll give you my opinion on the Shavkat Rakhmonov Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. I think, personally can't see it. I think if he does knock out Shavkat Rakhmonov, that'd be a big upset. And I think he could potentially get a world title shot, although Belal Muhammad will be saying that he deserves the title shot, which I think he probably does. He probably should be the next person in line for the title. Gilbert Burns has recently said that he wants to fight Belal Muhammad again in the rematch. I think they had a fight. Belal Muhammad won that fight, but Gilbert Burns, I think that fight was in May. Gilbert Burns had already had 2 fights this year and then fought him and then got injured. I think he injured his shoulder in the fight. I think I would have backed Gilbert Burns to win that fight potentially without the shoulder injury, and I would like to see that potentially ran back some point early next year. But then again, maybe just give Belal Muhammad the title fight. I think Leon Edwards beat him because they had a fight last year which ended. This is Edwards and Muhammad. They had a fight which ended early with an eye poke. Leon Edwards poking Belal Muhammad in the eye. Leon Edwards was dominating the fight. But again, you never know. Bilal Muhammad might have made some massive improvements. Bilal Muhammad might have come on strong in the end of that fight. You never know what will happen, so it'd be interesting to see. There's also news of a fight that's happening next week at UFC 296. Giga Chikadze was expected to fight Josh Emmett, which I think would have been a really good fight. However, Giga Chikadze has pulled out with an injury. I think Diego Lopez, who fought a couple of weeks ago at the last UFC event, I think it was the last UFC event, he fought a couple of weeks ago and won with a first round stoppage, I think. He says he wants to step in and fight Josh Emmett. I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC do that, because Diego Lopez has got a bit of star power to him now. I'd like to see that fight. It's better than Josh Emmett going through a camp and not fighting anyone. And then if Diego Lopez wins that fight, then he's got a top 10 ranking and potentially another title challenger in the future. 1 or 2 fights probably, and then he'd be fighting for a title. So I think that's a good fight for Diego Lopez. Probably not for Josh Emmett on such short notice. But I guess we'll see what happens. It only happens next week, so I guess we'll find out what the UFC decide to do. I think they will probably get Josh Emmett a fight somehow. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see. News about Khamzat Chimaev is heading in for surgery and wants to fight on the UFC 300 card. That could potentially be a title fight, a big title fight with the winner of Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, which happens in January. I think the UFC 300 will probably happen in March, so it'd need to be an early stoppage for either one of them. Or Chimaev could fight on the main card against a Paulo Costa or someone like that. I'd like to see him get another middleweight fight, to be honest, before he fights for the title. Potentially a 5-round fight. I do want to see Chimaev in a 5-round fight. I think he needs to have a 5-round fight to prove his endurance. I feel like maybe over a 5-round fight he might pace himself a bit more, and I hope he does, because he starts off strong for the first 1.5 rounds. Definitely wins. I think he's won probably every first round he's fought in the UFC. But he needs to pace himself more, and I feel like a fight with Paulo Costa would make him pace himself more. And that'd be a good... I'd like to see that for UFC 300 in March, hopefully. I think it's been quite a quiet news week for UFC, to be honest, so this might be quite a short video. I hope there's some other stuff. It might be quite a short video till tomorrow, to be fair. A lot of it's just talking about the fight card that happened last week. A lot of the headlines are about Jamal Hill getting arrested after a domestic violence issue with his brother. I don't know much about that, obviously, so I'm not really going to comment on it. Okay, there's probably 2 more things I could talk about here. Dolidze versus Imavov is set to headline a February 3rd fight. That'd be a good fight. Dolidze, I think his last fight was against Marvin Vettori. He was booked to fight Jared Cannonier, but I think Jared Cannonier has now pulled out of that fight with injury. Imavov, his last fight was against Sean Strickland. He was a highly touted prospect, I'd say, before Sean Strickland, but everyone's seen what's happened with Sean Strickland since. He's now a UFC champion, obviously. So it'd be a good fight. Potential the winner of that I would expect to potentially get a top 5 opponent next. And then probably if they win that, they might be fighting for a title. You never know. The middleweight division's really exciting at the moment with Adesanya losing. Everyone's got a new lease of life in the division, and they can all get a chance at getting the title shot, especially if Adesanya's not going to fight till 2027, which he said. I do think he'd probably fight late 2024 or early 2025. And I would like to see that, but obviously it's Adesanya. Adesanya can do what he likes. He could probably return in 2027 and get a fight for a title, potentially. I'll preview that fight closer to the event. And Dricus du Plessis talks about how he would have fought Adesanya in September, but he couldn't because he couldn't walk. There was a lot of stuff going around about this before the fight, so he was supposed to fight Adesanya at that event, which Sean Strickland then stepped in for. The UFC didn't like how he didn't fight on that card. Adesanya didn't like how he didn't fight on that card, but he said he couldn't walk, he said he was injured, and that led to them saying that the winner of Khamzat Chimaev and Usman would get the next middleweight title shot against Sean Strickland. I think du Plessis is definitely worthy of the next title fight. He's obviously getting the next title fight in January, which I'm looking forward to. I think it was quite unfair how the UFC did that, and Chimaev probably would have been fighting on this event if he didn't get an injury, which he now needs to go into surgery for, like I spoke about. However, maybe they just used that to build the fight a bit between Usman and Chimaev by saying the winner of that would get a world title fight. I wouldn't be surprised if they just used that to build the fight a bit. Definitely built more hype, but put more hype on the fight, I'd say. Put more hype on the card. Or potentially they just meant after du Plessis. I'm really excited for the UFC next year. I think there'll be some really exciting fights. Really interesting to see what the UFC 300 card's going to look like in March. They've obviously got their 3 first main events for pay-per-view cards sorted. It'd be interesting to see. A lot of the champions have fought recently or are going to fight on those 3 cards, so it's interesting to see if a champion can make a quick turnaround and which champions potentially will be fighting on that card, or if it will just be a McGregor versus Chandler fight, or potentially the super fight that Dana White was speaking about last week, which we've still not heard about. There was one more bit of news that I've seen during the week, actually, and that was Brian Ortega against Yair Rodriguez. They're going to be headlining an event in Mexico. It'd be interesting to see if Brandon Moreno could potentially get on that card. And a couple other Mexican fighters, potentially a Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko fight on that card. Just build it with Mexican talent, really. I think that's important. Raul Rosas Jr. will probably get on that. And both Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega have Mexican heritage, so that would be a really good fight for Mexico. The first fight they've done in Mexico for quite a while now. That just adds emphasis to what I said about really looking forward to what the UFC bring next year. Really looking forward to the fights that they've scheduled and really looking forward to potential fights. I think next year is going to be a really big year for the UFC, I'm hoping, and potentially a few new stars after McGregor are being built, potentially a few more stars after Adesanya. Hopefully we'll see Adesanya in the end of the year. In my boxing show I said about doing a video around the new year of the top 10 fights I want to see next year and the top 10 pound for pound. I might also do a top video predicting who I believe the world champions will be at the end of the year. If you guys have any other ideas for videos you'd like to see, please drop a comment. Also, please like and subscribe. Thanks guys for listening.